Phrankstars. It's another day to learn something new again. So today we'll be learning mineral nutrition. Remember last time we learned plant nutrition, in which we learned about photosynthesis on as a concept on its own. But you ask yourself, this photosynthesis, what does it produce for the plant? You observe that it only produces the glucose, which is a source of what? Carbohydrates. But you also notice that plants like animals, plants also need protein, vitamins, and other sources of food they need for their survival. You ask yourself, how do plants get these other sources of food? That's what we talk of mineral nutrition. It is a process by which plants obtain other nutrients needed for their what? Flourishment. It is a process, simply a process by which plants, not just green plants, all plants obtain nutrients needed for their what? Flourishment. That plant nutrition, we talk of these nutrients. What do they look like? We talk of they are what? They are called elements. So these mineral nutrients are called elements. Elements are those mineral nutrients needed by plants for their what? Flourishment. Because we know plants produce carbohydrates, which we know of, but they also need protein and vitamins and other sources of food for their flourishment. So how do they now get these other sources of food? We talk of what? Mineral nutrition. And these nutrients, what they come for? They come in form of what? Elements. Now let's look at elements as a topic on its own. Mineral elements. Mineral elements are those nutrients, nutrients or those things that the plants need for their flourishment. We have two types of mineral nutrients. We have macro elements, or you call them major, or you call them essential elements. And number two, we have the micro elements, or you call them the what? The minor, the non-essential, or you call them the what? The trace elements, or the what? Trace elements. These are the two types of elements. You have the macro, major, essential. We have the micro, minor, non-essential, and or you call them the what? The trace elements. Now, these micro elements are those mineral elements needed by plants in large quantities. They are those mineral elements needed by plants in large quantity. Now, I used to give my students an acronym to help them remember it. We have NPK, K, Mg, first. Usually in your exams, they might ask you which of these is not a major or a macro element. Once you know the macro elements, you can just do the elimination process and get your answer. So N is for nitrogen, the N is for nitrogen, the P is for phosphorus, the P is for phosphorus, the K is for potassium, the K is for potassium, the Ca is for calcium. In your chemistry, you know the symbols. The calcium, the Mg is for magnesium, your magnesium, then the Fe is for your iron. Remember in your chemistry, talk of your chemical symbols. This is your iron, and then the S is your what? Your sulfur. All these ones are called the macro, the major, or the essential elements needed by plants in large quantity. We have NPK, Mg first. So N is for what? Nitrogen, which is nitrogen. Now, how do plants get nitrogen, and what does it do for the plants? And when plants don't have it, what do they suffer from? Now, let's use a table to do this definition. Now, nitrogen will have elements. We'll have the elements. We'll have the source. We have the function. Then we'll have the word, the deficiency. Let's look at nitrogen number one. How do plants get nitrogen? I told you last week that when we have thunderstorm, they add nitrogen to the soil, but plants cannot use nitrogen. That's why they have what we call the nitrifying bacteria that does this conversion. I told you we have two types of nitrifying bacteria. We have the nitrosomonas, and then we have the what? The nitrobacter. Now, once this nitrogen enters the soil, this nitrosomonas will not convert it to nitrites. But still, plants cannot use nitrites. So this one will not convert this nitrites to what? Nitrates. So that means that the usable formula of this one is what? Your nitrates. Exactly. Now, what is the function of nitrogen? One, it helps in protein production. In protein production, it helps the plant produce protein. Actually, plants also need protein like human beings. And two, it helps in chlorophyll formation. It helps the plant to form chlorophyll, and also it helps in nucleic acid formation. Help the plant to form this DNA you have in your nucleus. nucleic acid formation. This is your DNA and your RNA, which you now have in your nucleus of the cell. Now, when plants don't have this nitrogen, what happens to the plant? We have the deficiency. Now we have here, we have we have the stunted growth, which the plant cannot grow very well. The stunted growth, or we call it the poor growth, and also we have yellowish leaves because it doesn't have chlorophyll. We have yellowish leaves. Because I told you this chlorophyll gives the plant its greenish nature, but because they don't have them, you have yellowish leaves, and also we have short leaves. Leaves do not grow very long. So this is for the nitrogen, the source, the function, and when we have the efficiency. Next, we talk about what? The phosphorus. Phosphorus. Now the source is called the phosphates. All these things are found, and that's why the mineral nutrition, these elements are found in the soil. The plants will not get them easily. That's why they have roots to go into the soil searching for these mineral elements. We have the phosphate. The phosphate will have the function. We have nucleic acid formation. We have some production of nucleic acid. Also protein synthesis. Protein synthesis. Now, when you don't have them, what happens? They have stunted growth. When plants do not have phosphorus, which is the phosphate, what happens to them? They have what we call the stunted growth. The stunted growth, they have a brownish or a reddish stem. If you see the stem, it looks brownish or reddish in color. That's for the phosphorus. Next, we have the potassium. The potassium this is N. This is N. This is your P, phosphorus, and then we'll have your potassium, which is your K. Now the source is called the potassium salt. Potassium salt also found in the soil. The potassium salt. And what are the functions? We have cell formation. It helps to form new cells, cell formation and cell division. It helps in cell formation and cell division. Now it's good that you read so that once you read biology every day, you just have to remember all these terms. They are very easy to remember. Cell formation and cell division, which is it helps to form new cells through cell division. When cell divides, it forms new cells. Also, we have regulation of metabolic activities. Regulation of metabolic activities. These are the functions of the what? Of the potassium. Regulation of metabolic activities. Now, when it doesn't have it, what happens? We have stunted growth. We have stunted growth. Then we also have the death of the plant. The death, of course, once the plant cannot divide, cannot give rise to new one, it does what? The plant dies. Death of the plant. Now, next we talk of the next one is NPK. Remember the acronym NPK, Mg first. The next word calcium. Calcium is your symbol is what? Ca. We have your calcium salt. We have your calcium salt. Your calcium salt in the soil. Then what are the functions of this calcium? One, plant need it for healthy growth. Plant need it for what? For healthy growth, and also for cell wall formation. Remember, when we talk of the cell, we talk of the cell wall in plant cell, and we talk of the cell membrane in animal cell. Cell wall formation. So when the plants don't have this calcium, what happens to them? Now they have what we call stunted growth as well. They don't grow very well, and they have poor root development. The roots do not develop very well because they don't have this thing to give them enough. They don't have this cell wall because this cell wall, what it does for the plant is give the plant protection, but because it's not actually there, they have poor root development. Now NPK Mg, remember we're using the acronym. Next we have magnesium. Magnesium and iron, I usually put two of them together. Magnesium and iron, I usually put two of them together because two of them perform the same function for the plant. Magnesium, we have iron, two of them does the same thing for the plant. Magnesium is Mg, capital M and small g, then iron is Fe. Now magnesium, what is the function of the magnesium? The source, is magnesium salt. Magnesium salt. Magnesium salt in the soil. For the iron, we'll have ferrous. Iron is this is why I use Fe. You call it iron in your chemistry. Ferrous, so you call it what? The iron salt. Now, what does it do for the plant? Well, how we call their major function is to form chlorophyll. So two of them perform the same function. That's why I put two of them together. We have chlorophyll formation, and also this one have what chlorophyll formation. These to perform the same function for the plant, chlorophyll formation. Now, what is their deficiency? They just have one deficiency. No, the plant doesn't have it. Just one thing that happens to the plant. That's what we call yellowing of leaves. Remember, I told you this chlorophyll gives the plant a greenish nature, but because they're not there, we have yellowing of leaves. The leaves becomes yellow. So anyway, you see a plant that has all the leaves yellow, that means the plant does not have magnesium and what? Iron. Yellowing of what? Leaves. Yellowing of leaves. And finally, we've done nitrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, iron. Next we have, last but not the least, we have sulfur. We have sulfur. Now sulfur is the last but not the least of the macro. Remember, these are ones made by plants in very large quantities. Now by plants in large quantities, we have the sulfate in the soil. Sulfate in the soil. And what is their function? They perform almost the same function as nitrogen, which is nucleic acid formation, and protein production. Protein production and protein synthesis are the same thing. Synthesis or production means the same thing. Now, what is we don't have sulfur, what happens? We have stunted growth, or also have yellowing of leaves. Now, these are the macro element. Remember, they are how many number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in number. MPK and MG first. This acronym will help you remember the macro elements. Now remember, I told you we have two types of elements. We have the macro and we have the minor. The minor, these are those ones needed by plants in very small quantities. They are not needed in large quantities as the macro. They are needed by plants in very small quantities. We call them the micro, the minor, the non-essential. These are non-essential. They are not really needed, but they are all needed. Non-essential, we call them the what? The trace elements. They're needed by plants in very small or very minute quantity. Now these ones, we just know them as the zinc, the boron, the manganese, the molybdenum, the silicon, and the copper. Now, probably in our next class, we discuss these ones intensely. But now, know that they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 in number, while the macro are 7 in number. Thank you for listening. See you next time.